Finite math. In this video, we're going to review algebra, but specifically, we're going to be solving inequalities. As you go through this video, you're going to see some icons on the top left. This icon means the process. We're going to talk about how to solve an inequality. Then we're going to do some examples. You get to practice. Then there'll be a self-quiz. Finally, your video task. What are you supposed to do now that you know all this stuff? Remember, it's not magic, it's math. So let's get started. Let's review an inequality for a second. Inequalities are algebraic expressions that compare numbers. Let's look at the symbols. The first one is less than symbol. The second one is greater than symbol. We're also going to be graphing. Now, some of you have learned to use an open circle on the graph, and this is super correct. For this video, we're going to be using parentheses. The first symbol is less than or equal to, and the second symbol is greater than or equal to. Most of us are familiar with using the closed circle on a graph, but for this video, we're going to be using brackets. So let's see how it works. Let's look at the first one. We're going to graph x is greater than 2. So how do we say that in words, or what does it mean? Basically, it means exactly what we said. X is greater than 2. Now to graph it, the first thing you want to do is put a dot on the 2. Now we look back and say, well, x is greater than 2. And we need to start thinking of numbers that are bigger or greater than 2. For instance, 3 or 4. Once we plotted those, we know exactly the direction that our solution set is going to be in. For an inequality, the solution set is always an infinite number of answers because basically x is greater than 2. It's all numbers that are greater than 2. The final step we have to do is decide, is it going to be a parentheses or a bracket? To do this, we look back at our inequality. It's greater than. That tells us it's going to be a parentheses. Now notice that the parentheses kind of points in the direction of our solution set. Let's look at the next one. We're going to graph x is less than or equal to 3. So what does that mean? Well, it means x is less than or equal to 3. The first thing we do is we plot 3. Now we ask ourselves, we need to find numbers that are less than or equal to 3. So let's plot some, like 2, 1, and that tells us the direction of our solution set. That's going to be going to negative infinity. Finally, we have to decide, is it a parentheses or a bracket? To do that, we look at our inequality. It's less than or equal to, so it's a bracket. And you notice the bracket is pointing in the direction of our solution set. Let's look at graph x is greater than or equal to negative 4. So what does that mean? Basically, x is greater than or equal to negative 4. First we plot negative 4. We have to think of numbers that are greater than or equal to negative 4. For instance, negative 3, negative 2. Once we have that, we can see that our solution set is going to be going to positive infinity, to the right. What are we going to use for our parentheses or bracket? We're going to use a bracket. And I know it's a bracket because I look at my inequality. It's greater than or equal to. Let's look at the last one. Graph x is less than 0. So what does that mean? That means x is less than 0. We're looking for all the numbers that are smaller than 0. Plot 0. Now which way do we go? To the left or to the right? Well, we're going to go to the left because negative 1 is smaller than 0. Negative 2 is smaller than 0. And so on. That means that our solution set goes to negative infinity. Finally, parentheses, bracket. We look at our inequality. It's less than. It's a parentheses. And that's as hard as it gets for graphing. Let's look at solving. Now, solving linear inequalities is exactly the same as we did for algebra, except for a major multiplication rule. And this goes for division too. When we multiply or divide by a negative number, we need to change the direction of our inequality. Let's look at our first example. Negative 2x is less than 8. And we want to get x by itself. How do we do that? Well, the opposite of multiplying is dividing. So we divide by whatever is hooked to the variable, which is negative 2. We're dividing by a negative number. That means we switch the direction of the symbol. Do you notice the original inequality is less than, and now our solution is greater than. Let's look at negative 2/3 x is greater than or equal to 6. For this one, since we have a fraction, negative 2/3, There's a couple ways we could solve this. First of all, we could do it by hand by multiplying both sides by its reciprocal, -3/2. But for my classes, we can use a calculator, so all we're going to do is we're going to divide by -2/3. Once again, we're just dividing by what's hooked to the variable, -2/3. To put this into your calculator, you're going to press 6, divide key, -2, fraction key 3. Now, if you're not very good with your calculator, it's okay. Just go to YouTube, type in your type of calculator, and boom, you're going to have lots and lots of examples. But for this one, we'll get x is less than or equal to -9. Now notice, we divided by a negative number, and the inequality changed directions. All right, we are ready to start solving. Let's look at our first one. -4x minus 5 is greater than 3. We're going to solve it as if it's an equal sign. We want to get -4x by itself. We need to get rid of -5. So all we're going to do is we're going to add 5 to both sides of the inequality, and we end up with -4x is greater than 8. We still need to get x by itself, so we're going to divide by -4. What happens now is our inequality is going to change directions because we divided by a negative number. So we end up with x is less than -2. Now we're going to graph it. I'm going to put a dot at -2. Now I have to think of numbers that are smaller than -2. For instance, -3 or -4 and so on. So my arrow is going to go to the left. It's going to go to -infinity. I chose parentheses because of my inequality. It's less than. So this is what your graph is going to look like. Let's look at the next one. 3 times q minus 6 plus 2q is greater than or equal to -3. First distributive property. So we're going to take 3 times q is 3q, 3 times -6 is -18, and then the rest of it stays the same. Now we're going to collect like terms. So on the left side, we have the q's. Now once again, I like to put like terms next to each other and then simplify. So that's how I get 3q plus 2q minus 18 is greater than or equal to -3. Well, 3q plus 2q is 5q. Now, we need to get 5q by itself. The opposite of subtracting 18 is adding 18. So we end up with 5q is greater than or equal to 15. Well, we want q by itself. So the opposite of multiplying is dividing. So I'm going to divide by 5. This gives us q is greater than or equal to 3. Let's graph it. So we're going to put a dot at 3. Now I need to think of numbers that are bigger than 3, 4, and 5, and so on. So my arrow is going to go to the right. Now I know that it's going to be a bracket because I look at my inequality. My inequality is greater than or equal to. That is the graph for this one. Let's look at the next one. -5x plus 12 is greater than or equal to 3 times 2x minus 1 plus 2. Right away, the distributive property. The opposite of 5x, or -1 times 5x, is -5x. The opposite of 12, or -1 times 12, is -12. Then we have to take 3 times 2x, which is 6x, 3 times -1, which is -3, and the 2 just hangs out. We can combine like terms, but for some reason, when I was doing this, I decided to get all the x's on the same side first. I subtract 6x from both sides, and that gives us -11x minus 12 is greater than or equal to -3 plus 2 is -1. We need to get -11x by itself, so we add 12 to both sides of the inequality. Now we need x by itself. We're going to divide by -11. Since we're multiplying or dividing by a negative number, our inequality changes directions. So x is less than or equal to -1. We're going to put a dot at -1. Now I have to think of numbers that are smaller than -1, like -2, -3, and so on. So I know that my solution set is going to go to -infinity. I chose the bracket because when I look at my inequality, it's less than or equal to. Cool. Let's look at this last one. 6 is less than or equal to 3x minus 3 is less than 12. This actually has 3 parts, but we're going to solve it just like an algebraic equation. Let's look in the center. What we want is x by itself in the center. I have 3x minus 3. I need to get rid of the minus 3. What's the opposite of subtracting 3? Adding 3. We're going to add 3 to each part of our inequality. So you're going to notice I add 3 to the left, the center, and the right. So let's add straight down. We end up with 9 is less than or equal to 3x is less than 15. Now we want x in the middle. So the opposite of multiplying is dividing. I'm going to divide each piece by 3. That gives us 3 is less than or equal to x is less than 5. This tells us x is between 3 and 5. Let's graph this one. On the far left, I have a 3. X is between 3 and 5. So everything from 3 to 5 is going to be included in our solution set. We know that the line is going to be solid between 3 and 5, no problem. But what's going to happen at 3? We're going to have a bracket because of our inequality is less than or equal to. And we're going to have a parentheses at 5 because it's less than. Now you get to try these 4 by yourself. Okay, pause the video, try it, and then we're going to look at it together. Let's see how you did. So the first one is negative 2y plus 9 is less than 17. We want to get rid of the plus 9. The opposite of adding 9, subtracting. When we do that, we end up with negative 2y is less than 8. Now we need to get y by itself. So anytime we have a number next to a letter, it means to multiply. And the opposite of multiplying is dividing. So we're going to divide by negative 2 on both sides of the inequality. Well, when that happens, remember, we have to change the direction of our symbol. So our solution set is going to be y is greater than negative 4. Let's look at that on a graph. I'm going to put a dot at negative 4. Now I want all the numbers that are bigger than negative 4, like negative 3, negative 2, negative 1, and so on. So I know that my solution set is going to go from negative 4 to positive infinity. Now at negative 4, we're going to have a parentheses because all I have to do is look at my inequality and it's greater than. Let's look at the second one. 30 minus y is less than or equal to 6 times y minus 2. We have the distributive property. Now let's do it. I'm going to take 6 times y, which is 6y, and 6 times negative 2, which is negative 12. Now we need to get all the variables on one side and everything else on the other. I like to put the variables on the left side, so that means I need to subtract 6y from both sides. This gives us 30 minus 7y is less than or equal to negative 12. We need to get negative 7y by itself. That means we have to subtract 30 from both sides. Now we have negative 7y is less than or equal to negative 42. We still need to get y by itself. So the opposite of multiplying is dividing, and we're going to divide by negative 7. This gives us y is greater than or equal to 6. Did you remember to switch the directions of your symbol? I hope so, because we divided by a negative number. We're going to put a dot at 6. Now I have to think of numbers that are bigger than 6. For instance, 7, 8, 9, 10. That means my solution set is going to go to positive infinity from 6. But what's happening at 6? I look at my inequality. It's greater than or equal to, so we're going to have a bracket. Let's look at the next one. 4 times z minus 6 minus 7z is greater than or equal to negative 15. The distributive property is first. 4 times z is 4z, 4 times negative 6 is negative 24, and the rest of it stays the same. I like to put like terms together, and that's what I did. 4z minus 7z is negative 3z minus 24 is greater than or equal to negative 15. The only thing that I did for that step was take 4z minus 7z. Now we need to get negative 3z by itself. The opposite of subtracting 24 is adding 24. And now we get negative 3z is greater than or equal to 9. We want z. We're going to divide by negative 3. And that gives us z is less than or equal to negative 3. Once again, I hope you remember to switch the direction of your inequality. Let's graph it. I'm going to put a dot at negative 3. Z is smaller than or less than or equal to negative 3. I need to pick numbers smaller than negative 3. For instance, negative 4, negative 5, and so on. So I know that my solution set is going to go to negative infinity. But what's happening at negative 3? We're going to have a bracket. How do I know that? Because my inequality is less than or equal to. For the last one, we have 3 parts, right? We have 16 is less than or equal to 5x minus 4 is less than 36. We need to get x in the center. Now I have 5x minus 4. I need to get rid of the negative or subtract 4. I add 4 to each piece of the inequality, okay? I do it to the left, the center, and the right. This gives us 20 is less than or equal to 5x is less than 40. We still need to get x by itself. We're going to divide everything by 5, and this gives us 4 is less than or equal to x is less than 8. We're going to graph 4, and x is between 4 and 8, so everything between 4 and 8 is going to be part of our solution set. Now we have to decide what happens at 4 and what happens at 8. At 4, we have less than or equal to as our inequality, so that becomes a bracket. For 8, we have less than, so that's a parentheses. Our graph is going to have a bracket at 4 and a parentheses at 8. Now that we've learned all of that, next is the self-quiz. You're going to pause the video, complete the questions, then press play to check. The purpose of the self-quiz is to see how much you learned. Whatever you're confused about or have to look back at your notes, that's what you need to practice. All right, put your notes away, try these 4, and then press play, and we're going to work it together. All right, let's see how you did. The first one is 12 is greater than or equal to negative 3x minus 3. We need to get negative 3x by itself. That means we add 3 to both sides, and we end up with 15 is greater than or equal to negative 3x. We need x. The opposite of multiplying is dividing. That means we have to divide by negative 3 on both sides, which gives us 5 is less than or equal to x. Well, let's graph it. We're going to put a dot at negative 5. We have negative 5 is less than or equal to x. That means x is bigger than negative 5. Let's start thinking of numbers bigger than negative 5, like negative 4, negative 3, and so on. So I know that my solution set is going to go from negative 5 to positive infinity. What's happening at negative 5? Well, we have a bracket because of our inequality, which is less than or equal to. I also forgot to mention, did you remember to change the direction of your inequality? Let's look at the second one. 2 times x minus 1 minus 3 is greater than or equal to negative 3. The distributive property first. 2 times x is 2x, 2 times negative 1 is negative 2, and the rest of it stays the same. I like to put like terms next to each other, so that's what I did. That's how I get 2x minus 3x minus 2 is greater than or equal to negative 3. 2x minus 3x is negative x, minus 2 is greater than or equal to negative 3. I need to get negative x by itself. The opposite of a negative or subtracting 2 is adding 2. This gives us negative x is greater than or equal to negative 3. I don't want negative x, I want positive x. That means I have to divide by negative 1. That gives us x is less than or equal to 3. I hope you changed the direction of your inequality because we did divide by a negative number. To graph it, we're going to put a dot at 3. Our inequality says x is less than or equal to 3. I need to think of numbers smaller than 3, like 2, 1, and so on. So I know that my solution set is going to go to negative infinity. But what's happening at 3? At 3, we have less than or equal to, which means we have a bracket. Let's look at the next one. Negative 2 times 3x minus 7 plus 4 is less than or equal to negative 8 times x minus 5 minus 6. Distributive property number 1. Negative 2 times 3x is negative 6x. Negative 2 times negative 7 is 14. Plus 4, we don't use a distributive property there. Now we're going to take negative 8 times x, which is negative 8x. Negative 8 times negative 5 is 40, and then just minus 6. Let me rewrite it so it looks a little nicer. All right. I have like terms next to each other, so 14 plus 4 is 18. 40 minus 6 is 34. We need to get all the x's on one side, everything else on the other side. As I've said before, I like to put my x's on the left side, and I like to move my x's first. So the opposite of negative 8x is positive 8x. I'm going to add 8x. We have 2x plus 18 is less than or equal to 34. I want to get 2x by itself. That means I have to subtract 18 from both sides. Now we have 2x is less than or equal to 16. I need x, which means I have to divide by 2. And finally, our solution is x is less than or equal to 8. Let's graph it. We're going to put a dot at 8. Now our inequality says x is less than or equal to 8. We need to think of numbers smaller than 8. For instance, 7, 6, and so on. Now we know that our solution set is going to go to negative infinity. But what's happening at 8? We look at the inequality. We have x is less than or equal to 8. That means it's a bracket. Cool. For the last one, 29 is less than or equal to 7w minus 8 is less than 13. Remember, for this, even though there's 3 parts, we need to get w in the center by itself. 7w minus 8. The opposite of subtracting 8 is adding 8. Now we do that to each piece, the left, center, and right. This gives us negative 21 is less than or equal to 7w, which is less than 21. We still need w, so the opposite of multiplying is dividing, and we end up with negative 3 is less than or equal to w is less than 3. Whew, we're almost done. Let's graph it. Well, w is between negative 3 and 3, so I'm going to graph negative 3 and 3. I know that w is between everything, so my solution set is going to be between negative 3 and 3. But what's happening at negative 3? Well, it's less than or equal to, so we're going to have a bracket. What's happening at positive 3? It's less than, so we're going to have a parentheses, and that's it. Good job! What do you do next? You need to practice, practice, practice. And even if your instructor says that your homework isn't part of your grade, you still need to do your homework. Did you like this video? Well, then like it. Did you really like it? Well, why don't you subscribe? And finally, did it help you? Why don't you share it with your friends? Remember, it's not magic, it's math.